Motivational interviewing is a specific type of interviewing technique that was originally developed for use with resistant clients like addicts. It proved to be so successful that it is now used industry-wide in human services, and it is spread to other disciplines as well. The techniques are taught to management and leaders in business, as well as most medical personnel. Motivational interviewing is about enhancing an individual's readiness to change. People come to us because they have some desire for things to be different in their lives. Their motivation to change may vary, but they have some desire or they would not come. Even someone who is forced to come has a choice. They've weighed their options and decided the consequences less for them if they come for counseling than if they don't. In motivational interviewing, we can even use that motivational choice as a starting place to work with a client. The process of motivational interviewing is very client-centered. It focuses on what the client says and what the client is willing to do. But at the same time, it is also very directive. The therapist is very involved and is very active in engaging with the client and drawing out the client's desires and observing what the client is saying and is not saying, and working with the client's own words and feeding those back to the client. Motivational interviewing explores and resolves our natural ambivalence. We accept that clients can both want to change and be reluctant to do the things that are necessary to change. Our goal in motivational interviewing is to look at where the client says he wants to be and where he is, and to identify what's called the dissonance, the distance between where the client is and where they want to be. We want to identify the obstructions that get in the way of where the client says he or she wants to be. We want to identify the discrepancies between what the client says and what he does, the things that don't quite match up. And to do that, we want to use the client's own words whenever possible. So there are three primary elements of change that we look at when we consider motivational interviewing. Our three primary elements that we look at when we consider motivational interviewing. That is change, the client's desire to change, ambivalence. We consider ambivalence to be a natural thing, and motivation. How motivated is the client to make the desired thing change? So we're looking at all three of these elements all through the process. We look at stages of change in motivational interviewing. And we consider change a little bit differently in motivational interviewing, in that we start at a little bit of a different place. So in motivational interviewing, we have pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, and some add termination. Look at those. In pre-contemplation, we're looking at people who maybe aren't even aware or are barely aware that there is a problem, and they really don't have any intention of changing in the foreseeable future. And yet they can still be engaged in the process because others are talking to them and they're already asking that who me question. So we call that stage pre-contemplation. And in pre-contemplation, we have a lot of people who particularly are dealing with addictions, or who a family member has said, I think you could use some help. And so they may be starting to explore things, but they don't really think that they have a problem. But they may be starting to ask some. Then we have the contemplation stage, where they know that there is a problem. Um, and they're not sure if they're part of the problem maybe yet, and they're not ready to do anything about the problem. They may be hoping that someone else will change and do something about it. Um, Lots of ambivalence in this contemplation stage. And a good place to do a lot of the weighing of the pros and the cons. Um, but often we will see people who will come into counseling during this contemplation stage. And sometimes what they're trying to do is to figure out, is it worth it to me to try to make this change? The preparation stage is where ambivalence really turns into an intention to take action, and where the person does perhaps get the name of counselors, um, uh, maybe even sets up an appointment, um, maybe reads some books, um, but actually starts to make some specific plans about how they might um, work on the problem and take some responsibility, some personal responsibility for the problem. The action stage is when the person has definitely committed to um, making some change. They've set some goals to modify their behavior, and they're actually engaged in um, action that moves toward modifying their behavior. They've changed their life experiences to help make those changes. They've made some alterations in environment if that needs to happen. So very definite things are happening to move toward the desired change. After a period of time, the hope is that the person will move into maintenance, where the behavior changes have been stabilized to the place where they're almost automatic. The person doesn't have to be um, uh, deliberate about them, that doesn't have to spend as much time thinking about them anymore. They engage in the new behaviors as a part of their normal lifestyle. They have chosen an effective support system that helps to reinforce the new behavior changes that they've chosen. And so we call that the maintenance stage. And then ultimately, for some people, we reach a stage that we call termination, where the support network is firmly in place, the new behaviors are established. They don't really require any professional support to be able to maintain the new behaviors. If they come back into mental health services again at all, it's usually for some new change that they want to make. And we encourage people to take the skills, the life skills that they've learned, and use those as far as they can. And when they've exhausted the resources that they have, then they come in and we move on from that place. So termination is that life stage. We look at ambivalence a lot in motivational interviewing because it's a normal and natural part of life and of change. We all experience it. Where we want to do things, but we don't have the motivation to do them. We start to make changes, we don't follow through on them. Making changes is difficult, and sustaining change is even more difficult. So helping our clients to understand and resolve natural ambivalence is one of the most helpful parts of motivational interviewing or any type of therapeutic intervention. We normalize resistance. It's to be expected that people would be ambivalent and resistant. So we help people to work with that rather than working against it. And we don't concern ourselves with that people struggle with making change. It's a natural thing that people would struggle with making change. We should expect that that would be the truth. We look at motivation. Why does the client want to make the changes? What is motivating the client to pursue the change as things will get more difficult, which most of the time they do when we're trying to make changes. In motivational interviewing, we help the client weigh the pros and cons of making the desired change and the steps they might be considering along the way. Some people are much more motivated than others. And so part of our role is to help assess that motivation for the client. And that even a client who is mildly motivated still has some level of motivation, and we work with that level of motivation to assist that client in moving forward to gain the goals in life that they want to accomplish. And this becomes really important because we don't want to impose our motivation on the client, what we think the client should be doing. Rather, this is what is the client's motivation to change. It's important for us to find that out. In motivational interviewing, we utilize a technique frequently called scaling. We have the client rate on a scale of 1 to 10 or 0 to 10 how they feel about something, and then tell us why they chose that ranking. That helps the client to become more focused. I've got some slides here that will show you some scaling exercises that we typically use. Then you're going to have an opportunity in the This first one is a weighing in exercise. Um, uh, we have clients list the pros and the cons of making the change that they think that they want to make. What would be the benefits of making this change? And a lot of times, even with a good change, there are some losses, there are some negatives. And so we ask clients to look at that as well. So that when those things start happening, they don't come as a surprise. So you're going to have an opportunity today using your behavior change to do a weighing in exercise as well. We look at the confidence meter. How confident is the client of his ability or her ability to make the change that they want to make? And we'll rank the confidence meter frequently during therapy, because that might change as things are happening in the client's life. And so we will ask, okay, how's your confidence this week? In your ability to make the changes that you've said you want to make, and what's affecting your confidence in being able to make those changes. Having something like this gives the client something to focus in on, a place to concentrate their thoughts. So you're going to have an opportunity, again, using your behavior change to do a ranking meter. And then another one that we often use is the readiness to change. How ready do you think you are? What are the things that are going on in your life? And do you think, how is now as a time for you to be able to make the changes that you want to make in your life right now? And again, you have an opportunity today using your behavior change to do a rating your readiness activity. In motivational interviewing, but also in counseling in general, there are some general principles that we follow. But especially in motivational interviewing, there are 5 general principles that we usually try to follow. We want to express empathy. for the client. We want to be sure that the client feels heard. Then we want to develop discrepancies. We want to help the client recognize the difference between where they say they want to be and where they are. We want to avoid argumentation. We don't want to argue with the client's point of view. We don't want to try to argue some sense into the client. That doesn't work. We want to listen to the client. We want to bring out what the client is saying, and as much as possible, use the client's own words to engage with the client. We're going to roll with resistance. We're not going to worry about things like denial and resistance and ambivalence. We're going to look at if a client's being resistant, why is the resistance necessary for the client? How is that protecting the client? Why is that important for the client? Because before the client can lay down that resistance, they have to feel some degree of safety. So what would the client need to be able to lay aside that resistance, to set aside that resistance? So we're going to roll with that resistance rather than push back against it. Then we want to support self-efficacy. We want our clients to become self-empowered. And in order to do that, we're going to affirm positive qualities that we are able to see in the client. Any characteristic that indicates their ability to engage in positive ways with the world, we're going to acknowledge those. We're going to bring those out and affirm those. So those are the general principles that we're going to engage in motivational interviewing. And then there are some general strategies that we're going to use. We abbreviate that with the acronym of OARS, OARS. The O stands for open-ended questions, and these are questions that can't be answered with yes or no, with just a yes or no answer. They invite the client to tell us more, to give us a little more information. We're going to use affirmation, and these affirmations are not just attaboys, not just, oh, you did a good job, or good for you. These are the affirmations that acknowledge the qualities that we see in the client that they can build on, that their characteristics, character qualities in the client. We're going to use reflective listening. And that's listening that demonstrates that we've heard what the client was saying. It uses the client's words. And we're going to engage in tentatively exploring what the client might be feeling in the reflective listening. We're going to summarize. We're going to identify themes and patterns that we hear in what the client is saying and bring the story together so that the client knows that we're staying on track and we're sure that we're holding everything together. And then we're going to elicit self-motivational statements from the client. What does the client say that he or she believes they can accomplish? In motivational interviewing, we have something that is called the miracle question. And the miracle question really just opens up the possibilities and encourages the client to think of options. The miracle question can be phrased in a number of different ways, but it always presents the client with unlimited options. You've got three ways that the miracle question can be phrased on this slide. Sometimes we'll ask the client to close their eyes and imagine along with us for a moment. If you were to wake up tomorrow and this problem were to be totally resolved, how would things be different? Or if everything was exactly the way you would like for it to be, what would be happening or not happening? If we had a magic wand and could wave it over the situation and fix it, what would be happening or what would be different? So there are lots of ways to ask the miracle question, but the key is to get the client's mind open to possibility thinking and thinking about options of what could be different in this situation. What could I maybe be doing differently? What might other people be doing differently in this situation if things were exactly the way I would like them to?